He wants Trump to be an equal footing with him. He wants to negotiate with Trump, not Ukraine. He wants to negotiate the whole new world order.
Good evening, members. It's wonderful to see a packed chamber this evening. Today, a very special guest is joining us, Mikhail Kasyanov, who is a Russian politician and served as the Prime Minister of Russia from 2000 to 2004 under President Putin. He was known for his economic reforms and debt restructuring. He was dismissed in 2004 due to growing disagreements with Putin's policies. Since then, Kasyanov has become one of Russia's most vocal opposition figures, co-founding the People's Freedom Party, which advocates for democracy and rule of law. He has been living in exile since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Please join me in welcoming Mikhail Kasyanov to the Oxford Union. Mr. Kasyanov, thank you so much for joining us here at the Oxford Union. I think we'll start with the most pressing issues of our time, the Ukraine-Russia war. You are the member of the Anti-War Committee of Russia and have warned that the outcome of this war will shape Russia's future. You have said that if Ukraine falls, the Baltic states will be next. Now, we are 3 years since the war has started. How do you assess Russia's progress as of today?
First, Mr. President, let me start just expressing my gratitude to you for invitation. I am so happy and great pleasure for me to be here in Oxford and great honor to address such a distinguished audience. Thank you. Thank you for this. Yeah, you're asking just the most important question, which, of course, right now concerns everyone who believes that independent Ukraine should stay as independent. And I think that is absolutely clear that the 3 years of war, Mr. Putin's just aggression already destroyed 30%, maybe 35% of economy of Ukraine. And Putin's Russia continue to conduct war of attrition with the expectation that Ukraine would surrender soon. And Putin made just out of Ukraine just some kind of puppet, not independent state. You're asking about future. I think just Mr. Putin right now destroys all future of Russia, of Russian people, of Russia's prosperity. And in fact, just sanctions which was imposed reasonably on Putin's regime, and in fact on the whole Russian economy, just have a long-term consequences, medium-term and long-term consequences. And unfortunately, none of those sanctions could press Putin right now to stop the war. Some other measures should be undertaken. That was first answer to this.
So, no, I think that's a good start. So I will come to sanctions. I do have specific questions when it comes to sanctions, but before that, we have seen that we are now in the 3rd year in the war, catastrophic on both sides, especially for Ukraine, and Russia has lost many soldiers and also has suffered economically. You know Putin, you've worked with him between 2000 to 2004. What is the end goal for him? At what cost will he come and sit on the table?
We should admit, and I should emphasize that we have two different Putins. And that time, Putin was a completely different person. He was freely elected with the result of 52%. And many of us, including me, we believe that Putin was the right person to continue pursuing these democratic reforms and build up democracy in Russia and market economy. And that was the reason why I accepted his invitation to work together with him. He won elections, and the Federal Parliament Duma just approved me as my candidacy as Prime Minister, and we started pursuing reforms. Because just when I accepted Putin's invitation, I asked him I agree to work with you, subject you support the reforms, and I listed to him just maybe 10 reforms here. And we did it. We managed to pull Russia out of crisis, which was 98, just to the trajectory of sustainable growth. We had a GDP growth at that time 6-7% per year, and people's income grew by 10-15% per year. And we have excellent relations with the European Union, with Great Britain. The first joint ventures, direct investment coming to Russia was coming at that time. And at that time, even just the full set of Russian cabinet was on a meeting together with the European Union Commission. And we launched 4 areas of cooperation. In the year 2003, already announced European Union and Russia that we are strategic partners. And our goal to build up free trade zone and visa-free zone from Lisbon to Vladivostok. We had excellent relations also with the United States. And in 2002, in Rome NATO summit, there was established special committee, Russia-NATO committee. That was the first step of having just, I would say, comprehensive cooperation. And at that time, me, being a second-person country, I announced that I was dreaming that Russia soon would be a full-fledged member of NATO. Putin said for the same question, just in a more soft way, just, I don't exclude that Russia could be a member of NATO. And nothing was about problems which started to arise later on. You're asking me what was the turning point or something like that, and I would say, from today's point of view, I believe that Putin pretended to be a democratically devoted person. And all of us, including President Yeltsin, who named him as a successor, and me, who accepted to be a prime minister together with him, and other ministers and many people, just we accepted this. We believed that Putin was the right person. What happened then? There was some kind of, I would say, change in attitude and relations, mostly between Putin and the United States, and that time President Bush. You remember President Bush's explanation that he looked in his eyes and saw just that he's a good person. And then my friend John McCain, who unfortunately died, he said just, I looked in Putin's eyes and saw KGB. Yeah, that was a completely different attitude. I didn't see just in his eyes KGB just also, but I believe that we all came from Soviet Union, but I work for State Planning Committee, that is the main economic agency in the Soviet Union. Putin worked in KGB. Appeared to be we're completely different people. The genes of KGB just built in his DNA, and they couldn't, as appeared right now, they cannot behave differently, rather than how they were taught in KGB high school. 2003, special operation, United States, Great Britain, and other small, I would say, group, special operation in Iraq. Maybe you can recall that President Putin at that time just decided to close his eyes and didn't criticize heavily, together with, I would say, China and France and Germany. They said, we don't like it, but they didn't criticize heavily. Putin understood that was a special contract, silent transaction. And he thought that the West would not criticize him and his interpretation of the law. And he believed that being a leader of the huge country with the nuclear button and member on the Security Council of United Nations, he has a right to interpret international law in his way he wanted. And at that time, in 2004, just the terror attack happened in Russia, unfortunately, in Beslan, where just more than 100 people, especially kids, were killed here. And Putin cynically used this, I would say, tragedy just to announce that he changing the policy. He said just we're surrounded by enemies, something like that, and started squeezing everything in Russia. He put all political parties for reconsideration, re-registration. As a result, out of 40 parties appeared to be left only 6 under his personal control. He created a narrow bottleneck for people to step in official politics. He named human rights activists as foreign spies. In television, there were some films or fragments shown, just some kind of stones on the streets somewhere, just with the special reports to British embassy, British spies, or something like this. Just all these things started to appear. And then was criticism of President Bush and and Vice President Cheney for Putin's violation of human rights. And then we understood that the West doesn't respect him. But he believes that because of his existence as a leader of the country with a nuclear button and a Security Council member, just that's already he gained the respect. Not because of deeds, but because of existence. But other, like President Bush, they believed in 3 things: just freedom, democracy, and human rights priority, and other members of that, and that's what's a big difference.
I mean, there is a lot to unpack over there. Few things you talked about during your time, that there was suppression that Putin started, but surely you are also part of the regime that was facilitating him in that. For instance, Khodorkovsky, which is your partner now as opposition leader, during your time, he was imprisoned for fraud cases, for corruptions, I think 9 to 6 years. Surely you facilitated him at times when you were the prime minister.
Yeah, I should, in this case, I don't know whether it's interesting to hear, but in fact, as I said, I asked Putin as a commitment to support reforms, and Putin implemented his promises. He supported all the reforms my cabinet initiated, but except 2. One of them administrative reform, which in my vision was cutting just government's responsibility and control features, etc., to allow people and businesses to develop themselves. And I managed to eliminate 2,000 different responsibilities of the government through the parliament, adopting the laws. And then Putin just stopped this reform because he didn't want just to lose more control, etc. Right now, just goes in opposite direction. Another reform, that gas sector reform, which of course was absolutely necessary to create competition in the production and in distribution, because Gazprom is a monopolist. And Putin didn't allow me to pursue this reform because just the concept, which already was absolutely worked out and supported by all experts, just to divide Gazprom, so that to take under government control the transportation system, like we have it in oil sector. But Putin didn't allow me to do this. And in 2003, another aspect of it, we have just mentioned Mikhail Khodorkovsky. Yes, Khodorkovsky, being one of the oligarchs at that time, just the billionaire, just started to criticize Putin for corruption using one case, which we all believe now that Putin was involved. That is sale on a half price just one oil company to Putin's friends. And that was pressure on business started at that time. Khodorkovsky and Yukos, his company, was the first company just to demonstrate to others that if you contrary to Putin's policy, you will be punished. Yes, I was in the office at that time, in a position, and I started to criticize this. And there was public disagreement between me and Putin appeared. plus at that time, just pressure on Ukraine. I said Ukraine is equal partner, and we conduct just the full-scale negotiations just an equal partner. Just let Ukrainian businesses to have a better presence on the Russian market. I reduce all tariffs, and so that Ukraine could gain just more money just selling to Russian people just their products. And it was a very successful cooperation. Putin just criticized me on that. And then he started pressing just on using the gas pipeline. I, as a chief of the government, said to Gazprom just not to touch the gas supplies to Ukraine and Belarus, although there was problem with payment by them. But Putin just gave an instruction just to turn the pipe. And there was also a disagreement. It was a real public already fight. And that's how we came just to understanding that we cannot work together. But 4 years we spent together, and I said just, as I said, we got a good result. And even after my departure from the government, just Russia continued to have very good economic growth. And in fact, we doubled GDP within 10-year period of time. Yeah.
So I want to come back to Ukraine. You mentioned, nukes. More importantly, Russia as a superpower. And one of the anxiety in terms of Western response has been the anxiety of a nuclear war. Would Putin push the red button when it comes to it?
I think that is a big mistake of many, not maybe many, but few leaders in the West, that they appear to be just fruits of Putin's blackmailing of using nuclear weapons. My belief is that Putin is afraid of nuclear button more than Biden or Scholz. He would never use it because just he understands first he wouldn't achieve anything on that, and secondly he destroyed all attitude, even his main partner China, because just the Chairman Xi already mentioned, being in Moscow, that any future application of nuclear weapon would be already China condemned, so that Putin would have no single partner, no single supporter, no single, I would say, country who can just share his attitude. And secondly, just the US and the NATO, they already just gave him I would say, confidential explanation that the retaliation would be absolutely destroyment, not nuclear. It will be usual, conventional answer, but it will destroy all of infrastructure, and not only military infrastructure, and Putin and his team. And he knows that this is useless.
So if you were advising Western powers, would you advise them that countries like USA, Britain, Germany should allow troops to go to Ukraine to defend Ukraine?
Oh, let's start answering this question a little bit step by step. Because just you wanted to have everything in the end. Yeah, I think let's first just come back to the situation what we have now. The United States, Great Britain, European Union kept Ukraine alive. But the feeding of Ukraine was just little by little, so that they would not have a real advantage on the battlefield because of blackmailing, Putin's blackmailing. But in fact, they don't know what to do further on, how to end this. Today, a lot of, I would say, speculation that negotiations would start soon. My absolute just, I would say, I'm sure that there will not be negotiations in the upcoming future. There is no leverage on Putin. What President Trump now is saying, just many different things, we've put them together to negotiate, etc. Mr. Trump wants to be a peacemaker. He wants to force people to sit down and negotiate and to resolve their conflict. It's not a conflict, in fact. And Mr. Putin doesn't want to be a part of these negotiations with Ukraine under the pressure of peacemaker Trump. He wants Trump to be an equal footing with him. He wants to negotiate with Trump, not Ukraine. He wants to negotiate the whole new world order. But Trump doesn't understand this issue. That's why he already instructed his people just in 100 days we should we have come to some kind of solution. But what Putin says, we have no signals, no proposals, we have nothing. Months already passed. Putin continue offensive operation. Every day they're moving a little bit, but moving, destroying infrastructure of Ukraine. Continue war of attrition. He believes he will win. The economy of Russia much bigger than Ukraine. Manpower resource in Russia much bigger than Ukraine. Ukraine already suffering of this. Putin has an advantage in the battlefield with equipment. He produces 4 times more military equipment and ammunition than all European Union altogether. He managed to switch economy on military footing because of even income, foreign exchange inflow in 1 year, 2022, when the sanctions was not operated in a normal way, but the oil and gas prices jump up and Putin got just billions and billions and billions. And he managed to spend them just to restore all infrastructure on all enterprises of Soviet Union, which my government, my cabinet put on restructuring. Right now, just they continue to produce old equipment, all ammunition, but which is necessary on the battlefield. The issue is how to press Putin to negotiate. It means to create feeling of him that tomorrow the economy will collapse, because everything in Russia right now based on money. There is no mobilization of people. That is, they're going as a contractors. Putin raises just payment for that, and people from rural regions, unfortunately, accepting this and coming to kill Ukrainians, but getting just big money. They never received such money and would never receive in their life. Right now, Putin had to spend 6.5% of GDP to the war. Ukraine, with all support of United States and the whole world, spend on the war approximately and spent $100 billion US for the war. 100 billion. Putin spends 150. He has advantage. That's 6.5% of GDP. That's high, but not critical. Israel, for instance, spending just 5% of GDP every year because they live in the war. United States, 4% of GDP is okay, 5 maybe even so. China, same year. 6.5, a lot, but not critical. But Mr. Trump believes that exposing more sanctions of oil sector on Russia, that would create for Putin just feeling that is already end. It's not the case. Because of the simple reason, the oil price could be reduced by efforts of the United States, by encouraging production and opening just new fields in the United States. But oil price couldn't come down lower than 65% for United States. $45 per barrel, sorry, $45 per barrel. Because just that is critical. Lower than that, the production is not profitable. $65 per barrel of oil in the US, it means approximately Russian oil will cost 60. It is a reduction, really, because Putin's budget built up on the expectation of $70 per barrel. 60, that's already a reduction. But in terms of the whole losses, it's only 15 billion US dollar per year. 15 billion US dollar per year for Putin is nothing. Other things, what Trump says, we impose just tariffs for all products coming from Russia. The trade between Russia and Ukraine and the United States is zero. It's not a leverage at all. Putin would laugh on that. That's why there is any reason for Putin to step in any negotiations. He wants to discuss, have pictures, and shaking hands with the President of the United States and decide the fate of the world, of nations. But Trump offers him just sit down and negotiate with Ukraine. Putin says, I don't know just who this Mr. Zelensky is about. He's not a real legitimate president. That's the reason. United States new administration already picked up the statement, say, oh, maybe just elections in Ukraine is a good thing to do. Just they going in the wrong direction. What they shall do, my answer to your question, on top of controlling the world market oil price, let's 65, but to considerably increase support of Ukraine. Just it's better to double. It is nothing for the United States. Right now, the United States spent 0.5% of GDP to support Ukraine. It's nothing. Same, it's nothing for Germany. If we compare, for instance, or recall spending of the United States in the war in Vietnam, it was 5% of GDP. Now just they have 0.5. It's nothing for the United States economy to support. But in this case, Putin having a reduced income because of lower oil price, on top of that, should spend more for military, not 6.5% of GDP, but 15% of GDP. That's already a wave to catastrophe. That's only this could press Putin just to sit down and seriously negotiate. I think Mr. Trump and his administration would realize this soon. In a few months and 100 days, they will understand that Putin is not capable of negotiations. And he, maybe just his I would say, the character would appear, strong character that as a I would say, tough developer on a tough New York market would say just, oh, I cannot accept this guy anymore. And that will make decision contrary to his expectations not to spend money to Ukraine, but to double support of Ukraine. Europe already prepared for this. Great Britain already, just the government said, just we're ready to increase up the military expenditure up to 2.5%. That's not enough, of course, but 2.5, that's already better than 0.5%. Baltic states already made a decision to have 4% of GDP to spend. Poland already said just we will have even more. And Germany, during just election campaign, this discussion taking place. That's absolutely the case. And another important partner and player to press Putin, China. President Trump could somehow negotiate with the big partner. China and the United States, they're very interdependent.
I want to interrupt here before we go to China, because there is a lot of interesting material you mentioned that it needs unpacking. So I understand that you're of the view that more military support, logistical support, weapon support will put him under pressure. So the first question is, why just that? Why not further than that, sending military troops? Why is that not more pressure than, because for the logistics and weaponry support, 3 years in the war, there still has been there. And alongside that, you mentioned a very interesting point, the incentive. i.e. the economic supply, as long as it's there, Putin will continue. Surely there is not unlimited supply of cash. Over the last 3 years, more than $300 billion alone spent, more than 300,000 soldiers dead, sanctions on every sector, oil prices. You've seen that even though there's a global surge of oil prices, but Russia has to go through, I think, the high seas to give oil to countries like India. So there is already a crippling economy. How much more does it have to go worse for him to negotiate? If economic is an incentive, there isn't really a great condition now.
Two parts of this problem. First, there is a wrong understanding that Putin thinks just about future of Russia, and that's why just the normal logic of Western politicians is that Putin should understand that tomorrow would be worse, and just Russian people would live just much worse. It doesn't play on Putin. Just he is thinking about himself and his power, how to keep himself in Kremlin. That's why he's thinking about today, maybe tomorrow, but not in a medium-term perspective, or not long-term. About troops on the ground. And in fact, that is the issue which no one knows how to settle. What kind of security guarantee the West could provide to Ukraine? That's the issue number one. Maybe Ukraine could be prepared to lose just part of territories, not officially, but to accept as the reality, maybe in a temporal way, whatever. They say diplomatically we will deal with this, maybe just sooner or later we will bring it back. But they already prepared, I guess, to accept this. But they cannot accept same what happened in 2014, 2015. When it was ceasefire agreement, so Minsk I, Minsk II agreement, and then just Putin was prepared and just have full-fledged invasion, full-scale invasion. And that's why just security guarantee, that's issue number one. Trump said we never allow Ukraine to be a member of NATO. Ukraine just knocking the door of NATO, say, get me in. The issue is, what its alternative could be? Troops on the ground. I agree with you. France president already said about that. Some other leaders already also said, we don't exclude, but not as a peacekeepers, because just it's not really just in the mandate. It should be some kind of special agreement replacing just membership in NATO. And I said also, and some kind of commitment between the United States and China, so that China would stop, I would say, encouraging some kind of Putin's ability to have imported goods, etc. And in fact, for China, it is very important to have weak Russia. Russia with Putin at weak Russia. And China just explore more and more. They don't want just to destroy Ukraine, but they don't want strong Russia. They believe just weak Russia, that is comfortable for them. That's why just they don't want to support Putin even more. Putin already just asking for 3 years, let's build up a second project, so-called Power of Siberia #2, that's gas pipeline. China doesn't want to do this because just they are okay with this. We have one pipeline between Russia and China, which capacity only 30 billion cubic meters. But we sold to European Union 130. Right now, replacement is 30. It means Putin doesn't know what to do with natural gas. And in fact, if you stop production on those drills, just you never can restore the production. That is a big problem. That is a medium-term problem.
No, I think we can see that, but there is one very interesting point, which is when you mentioned earlier that the risk assessment of nuclear escalation from your end is not much because Putin does not want that, and any further escalation from the West should be a possibility. You also mentioned that Putin wants his own survival. There's a bit of a contradiction because surely if he wants his own survival, the survival of his regime would mean he will go to extreme lengths to protect that. And that does put the risk of someone going to extreme lengths to protect their survival to take any means necessary, which is a nuclear escalation. So that in context, do you think this day, Western governments, especially NATO and Europe, are making the right decision by not providing troop support? Or as of today, if you think that there's going to be no negotiations, pointless, this is time for them to put pressure on him to negotiate?
Again, just on the application of nuclear weapons, I think that there's not just a reality. There is a contradiction because Putin wants to continue the war and Putin wants just to stop the war. But he wants to stop the war on his conditions. He wants just Ukraine to surrender. It could call whatever expression it could be, but he wants, of course, just some kind of transaction. Trump is guy of transaction, and Putin wants transaction. Putin believes that everything could be purchasable in this world. Trump right now demonstrates the same. He already offering just to purchase everything in the world. It looks like just two guys could agree on something, but they have different mentality and different I would say, goals. Putin wants to be on equal footing with Trump. Trump wants Putin to be somewhere there, just settle the original problem. But again, the escalation, it is inevitable thing, because just Putin understands only pressure. That's what we have to make to create the military advantage in the battlefield for Ukraine. In this case, he won't understand. As I said, if you increase support of Ukraine, Ukraine could get a disadvantage, could replace lack of manpower resource by special equipment. And in this case, just the situation will be different. And in this case, Putin would sit down and negotiate seriously.
I want to move on, especially now with, there is a big question mark with the future within Russia as well. The succession of Putin. You lead the People's Freedom Party, and you live now in exile for the last 3 years. You have said that Putin will eventually be replaced by a quasi-successor controlled by Russia's security services. Now, how realistic is then the democratic transition in Russia? What do you see is to be the future of Russia post-Putin?
Russia inevitably would come on, I call it, gray period. If Putin disappears, some people just wrongly believe that tomorrow will be great democratic life, freedom, nothing. If Putin disappears, there will be a gray period. Gray period means not quite strong government. None of right now potential Putin successors could be so popular and so strong as Putin is now. Putin right now uses the main instrument of his rule is fear. He created a fear among all people in I would say, as they call, the vertical of power, in the federal governments, in the regional governments, everywhere. And they all like hostages of Putin's regime. But I should stress that majority of them, absolute majority of them, against the war. They were not asked by Putin or by anyone would they would like to have this war. And the Putin's decision to start this war just destroyed all the expectation about their life. And secret services or militaries, they will, if Putin disappears, they would decide who will be a compromise person. First, to keep all of them with the guns. Because as soon as you are not in a position just where under you is people with the guns, you disappear immediately. That's why they continue, they will be fighting to each other, but will come to the compromise. And that would last for a couple of years. And then this compromise person, understanding that he has a power and would like to get some kind of recognition inside Russia and outside. And of course will be some kind of elections. It will be quasi-elections, not democratic elections. And then again, there will social unrest started, and in this case, just the real changes would inevitably start. That's what I take for future or becoming or building up a real future, like 5-6 years after Putin disappears.
I mean, there's quite a theory for social change for the next 10 years. But how do you see dismantling the oligarchic control of Russia? Because they are now very much embedded and strengthened within the cause. Even if Putin is not there, they still have that power to bring in the successor. How do you dismantle them before you see a true change in Russia?
Yeah, not oligarchy. That I'm saying right now, only militaries, not necessarily militaries, but I mean enforcement agencies, not only militaries, but they ruling the country, but not oligarchy. Oligarchy just already, there is no oligarchy. There are Putin's friends, billionaires, but those rich people who was called in 90s oligarchy just already disappeared. Yeah, they simply have no power and no influence at all. But as I said, just these militaries, the generals of different agencies, they would be very much afraid of their future, and that's why there will be the transition period.
And do you see yourself to be part of this transition and playing a role in the change?
As soon as it's appeared to be possible to come back, of course we come back to Russia, and we continue just our political job, just dealing with people, educating them, just explaining what is the reality is and what future should be. Of course, it's a dangerous thing, but as I said, just I believe that sooner or later, I think sooner, as I said, in a couple of years, such situation could appear.
But what makes you different? Because you were once part of the same system that enabled it.
That helps me. In fact, because people just, especially elder people, remember success of my government, and in fact, I still just feeling and getting just some kind of messages of respect, even from those people who just were forced to work with Putin. Yeah. Although I don't have contacts with Putin's government, but even a few ministers just worked with my cabinet. Now just work with Putin. Yeah. They, as I said, as the hostages, just continue to implement, explaining to themselves that they saving country from collapse or something like this. Although there is some kind of, I would say, internal problem in the people's mind, because just Russians in fact cannot accept the understanding that their government and their country killing just thousands of civilians in a neighboring country, and that's why they choosing just to close their eyes and just think about their own survival, and it is very difficult, and that will be quite an important period of time to clean people's mind, just to stop propaganda and just to explain them what was the reality. That's why just, I said, international court is necessary. Maybe tribunal is necessary. And especially consideration inside Russia, just real justice. Yeah, it's necessary.